Julianne, move to your left just a little bit.
To my left?
Uh-huh. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
A little bit more. Trying to center you.
All right.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. Very good. We are coming up. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you today. I want to thank you with all of my heart for honoring me and for being part of this family here. Bernadette, Zenobia, Francis, sending you all so much love. It's an honor, a profound honor to be with you. And I'm honored that you choose to be with me and this whole wonderful team who make this show go every day. And I'm so honored to have this woman with me, the brilliant economist and educator, Dr. Julianne MALVEAUX. Of course, she's a nationally syndicated columnist, but she's also a radio show host. You've got to catch her on Mondays at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on WPFW, WPFW.org. That's right. So wherever you are, you can hear, you can listen. And please tune in because she has got one of the most brilliant minds and just really pointed insights. And she's really for these times, for times such as these, as we look at these tariffs, this 90-day pause on tariffs for everyone except for the Chinese. It's a funny thing, these tariffs. People's 401ks have taken quite the beating. There's been a lot of fear. And yet, I was just reading in Common Dreams, Dr. Julianne MALVEAUX, that the Trump tariff whiplash boosts wealth of mega rich by $304 billion, according to Jake Johnson. He does such brilliant reporting there. He's been on this show before. As retirees, small business owners, and consumers, he writes, reeled from the chaos sparked by U.S. President Donald Trump's erratic tariff policies. The richest people on the planet saw their wealth surge on Wednesday as the White House partially froze the duties it imposed on most countries. It's interesting. I heard Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, one of your colleagues, brilliant economist, who has kind of run off the reservation, if you will, because he's extremely progressive and he's just really revealing the secrets, if you will. Like, everybody, this is how this works. And I would urge you to listen to him and to people like him and you who have these impeccable credentials who have said, no, it's a little bit more than this. He said, I'll tell you the problem with the Chinese. I said, what is he about to say? He said, we have not forgiven them for their success. See, when you leave the United States, everybody, they are the giants on the world stage economically.
Yes.
We've got to get out of the 20th century, move into the 21st and into the 22nd. It's a whole new world. We can do what we want. What we're trying to do is grab an era that has passed by. I read to you portions of the Lima Proclamation from 1975 that told us this is globalization, this is what's happening, it's going to happen, and this is what's been happening. That's why President Nixon and his wife went to China. Not just because they wanted to shake hands, it was a whole new world order. And what they did was hunker down behind closed doors and become they've become the power players on the world stage economically. And I urge you to travel, everybody. And if you can't travel, go online and look at footage of Moscow. Look at footage of Sao Paulo. Look at footage of different cities in China. You will see, particularly when you look at China and Japan and these emerging countries, they have infrastructure, Dr. MALVEAUX, speed rail. They have moved on while we are, what did my father say? We're building bombs, they're building Buicks.
If you think about it, China is creating colleges while we're closing them down.
Would you say that one more time?
China's creating colleges while we're closing them down.
And they're
They're,
world-class universities, are they
engineering.
not?
Hmm?
And they're world-class universities, are they
Oh,
not?
absolutely. And they're engineering, where we can't get folks through engineering if they don't have financial aid. They've got free engineering schools. And so we are seeing all of our isms
Hmm.
keeping us behind. It's not just racism and sexism, it's classism and other things, but education ought to be any nation's number one priority. It's not in
Well,
the United States, but it is in China. They are building the next generation. We are strangling the next generation.
we're talking with Dr. Julianne Malveaux, who, in addition to being this brilliant economist, of course, she got her MIT credentials. That's where she got her PhD in economics. Of course, they tried to delay giving her her degrees, but that is its own story. But that's part of the story that we're talking about here. But she's also the president emeritus of Bennett College for Women. She's taken these sterling credentials, and she has always been seeking ways to help the marginalized children. I mean, these children, there's genius everywhere, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, and oftentimes it doesn't show up on the tests.
No, the
There's some
test, the
genius.
tests are super. Who wrote the test?
Okay.
Who wrote the test for who? I mean, I remember long ago taking a multiple choice test, and they asked, and I did a whole riff on it. They asked, where was the river Danube? And my response was, as sure in the hell ain't in the hood.
Uh,
Why would you know where the River Danube was if you had not had some European education? If you're in inner city school, are you going to have European education? How is your IQ going to be measured by where you know where the River Danube is? I mean, that is just an absurd kind of question. You often get these absurd questions. I had a challenge at a point in time, a cognitive challenge. And so they sent me to this person to find out if I was crazy. Well, I was, but that wasn't the story. The man asked me to go backwards from, I think at that time Bush was the president, go backwards to name all the presidents. Of course I could do it. And I'm thinking, what if someone else was sitting in this chair? Who would be able to do that? It's not that I'm especially brilliant, it's that I know who the presidents were because
mhm.
that was part of my education. He asked a bunch of other questions, and some of them were culturally weighted. And then the guy told me I was very challenged and he couldn't evaluate me. I said, good, because I don't want you to evaluate me. He asked me who freed the slaves. I said, nobody. Um, he said, well, what about Lincoln? I said, what about him? And he said, well, this is not a political discussion. I'm trying to evaluate you. I said, but you're asking me political questions. And anyway, I passed. Whatever was supposed to be wrong with me was wrong with me, but it wasn't wrong with me because of him. But the point is that there's so much culture infused in conversations that it depends on who knows what, which is why the Trumpian attack at the Department of Education and at diverse education really allows people to use their cultural assumptions to marginalize others who don't agree with their assumptions.
Let's talk about that because I mean, there's so much to unpack, but I want to focus on education. But while I have you here, just because of the tumult of the past few days, the tariffs are on, the tariffs are off. They're paused for everybody but the Chinese, as if we are going to bring them, our creditors, to their knees. Okay.
Wait a minute. This fool is walking around talking about kissing his hind parts. China is not going to kiss his hind parts. China will bite
Hmm.
his hind parts before they kiss him. I mean, this is so absurd. China has 3 times the population that we do. 3 times the population. They are much bigger
Oh, wait a
consumers.
minute. 3 or 4 or 5. They have so many people. It was illegal to have more than one. Dr. Malvo, come on. But it's not just him. See, I remember, see, because I lived in New York in the 90s. I
Mhm.
remember when he was on the verge of bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy.
4 or 5 times. 4 or 5 times.
But I'm telling you, I saw something and I remembered something and I bumped into it online, Dr. Malvo. It was an interview they were profiling him on CNN. And Gloria Borger, you know, the famed writer and political analyst, was asking Attorney Pomerantz, who was the attorney for the 72 banks, whom then Citizen Trump owed. And he said, we decided, yes, he was on the verge of bankruptcy. And yes, it was personal bankruptcy, not just institutional. He said, but he said something interesting, and you could understand this and really get it as an economist. He said, we decided not to kill him. And she looked, he said, oh, no, I mean, kill him as in let him go bankrupt. We determined that he was worth more to us alive than dead. So you're dead if you're bankrupt. Oh, no. This was it. This was in this interview, and I had to remember it. And I started looking for it. He said, so we decided to keep him alive and let him be our spokesman because he's a salesman. He's a brilliant salesman. And so Wilbur Mills, who was his commerce secretary, oversaw his bankruptcies. He is a front man for bigger forces because if he goes away tomorrow, you got J.D. Vance as a front man. I mean, you've got all these people who are fronting for.
They're front people for predatory capitalism.
They're right.
Front people for exploitation. And so, as much as I abhor the Orange Man, I know you don't like that, but
no, I don't, because I don't want him. I don't want him to say that. I don't want anyone to speak of you in a pejorative way. And I know how big you are. I mean, you're one of my mentors. And yeah, I know, because I know Ed Harmon, and you would take my knuckle, you would get your ruler out, because I know what kind of teacher you are, and you grab me on my knuckles. Don't act like I don't know you. Get out of here.
Well, so let's just call him whatever we call him. Let's call him the current president. Yeah. But what we know about the current president is that this is not just about him. I mean, a lot of people are focusing on him, but it's not just about him. It's really about the economic structure and the cultural structure that are crumbling. The crumbling of the economic structure is not about this tariff war. It's about the fact that the United States has used their predatory ways to inject themselves into other people's countries and business. For a long time, people were willing to accept it. Now people are not. This is what's called the end of imminence. For the longest time, the world kowtowed to the United States of America. Now the world is not kowtowing. Why not? Because as my granny used to say, your drawers are showing. When you screw up and people see it, they're like, your drawers are showing, or the emperor has no clothes. And so what we've seen is our weakness. We've seen our weakness because of our pettiness. We've seen our weakness because this president, not just this time, but the previous time, has done the hookah puka with Putin. In other words, he's been closer to Putin and to Russia than we've ever seen a United States president be. And that's threatening. Europe is looking and saying, can we count on the United States? Whatever happened this week with tariffs, here's what we do know. The current president has damaged our international reputation. And there are a lot of people who used to be our allies who now don't trust us or don't know. And as I know, I talked to a CEO friend from San Francisco from back in the day, and he said, I wouldn't build a factory in the United States. He said, I wouldn't build anything. I said, well, so what do you do with your cash? And he has a lot of it. He said, stacking it. He said, I'm stacking it. He said, I'm not investing in anything. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. As soon as you inject uncertainty into markets, so people don't know what's going on, you can't do not even a 90-day, you can't do a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year. It takes 2 or 3 years to build a factory. And if you can't do a projection that says, I'm going to get ROR, you're not going to build it. You're just going to say, okay, fine. We'll move on to the next thing. I just saw 2 young women on CNN about an hour ago. Both have small businesses.
I saw that.
And neither of them they're both confused. And they both have thriving businesses.
But is this the interview, Dr. Malveaux, where this woman said, I had $30,000 to get my goods, that are to be shipped from China.
Yes.
But now it's going to cost me $200,000. I don't have it.
Exactly. So her stuff is going to sit because of the. How do you? I mean, the tariff on China now is 125%.
What does that mean?
That means if something was going to cost you $10,000, it's now going to cost you $22,500.
Wow.
So that's 125% tariff. So if you so this lady is expecting goods. She has a baby store. I mean, she sells all things baby. Probably half of her things are being manufactured in China. She's
Yeah.
put orders in. She has about 4 months worth of inventory. She's expecting these orders to come in based on her projections about her sales, but now she can't afford to bring them in. And then said even if, and she didn't get into that part, but even if if she had the money to bring the goods in, let's say again, there's a stroller that costs $1,000. That grand stroller is now $2,250. You're the customer. You ordered the stroller thinking you're going to pay $1,000 for it. Now it's $2,250, or more than twice what you expected to pay. Are you still going to want the stroller? Or are you going to walk on by and say, well, I'm sorry, I can't have it? So if she takes the risk of spending the $200,000 to bring the stroller in, is anybody going to buy it because it's more than twice the price of what she might have advertised? Now she might eat economically. She could probably eat a little bit. Let's say she ate $250, but that's still $1,000 stroller now costs $2,000. And as she shared, she has employees with health care.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, unless something shifts, she's going to be out of, I won't say she'll be out of business. I pray not. But she can't find anybody to manufacture this stuff at the price that China is manufacturing them. So what does she do?
Well, see, I'm trying to figure out what the powers that be are doing, because you know as well as I do, particularly given our experience with Reverend, and he got so close to the presidency. We saw just that this is a very, very controlled system, that it is an institution, and you don't just walk in there. You don't walk in there as some unknown, unvetted entity. It does not work like that, everybody. Um, what is Wall Street thinking? Because now, as I read to you from Jake Johnson in Common Dreams, and this is in all the major newspapers, Bloomberg, and all of these CEOs are rejoicing. I'm like, because they've gotten richer, they've been enriched. So how sad? How what am I to make of all of this? Because guess what? Wall Street's rejoicing, Main Street is collapsing. And remember, you said at the Wall Street Summit some years ago, you said, to paraphrase you, but I never will forget this, you said, Main Street didn't collapse. Detroit did not collapse. Detroit was collapsed. I will never forget that because it took me through the looking glass. You said we're not collapsing, we're being collapsed. Why?
And I can't give you the answer to why, because it's really, I mean, my Machiavellian brain thinks that when we hollow out the middle class, eviscerate the poor, elevate the top 1 or 2%, that what you end up doing is creating people who will do anything, who
Okay.
work for any wage. Oh, so minimum wage, they'll work for any wage because they got to eat. I mean, they got to be sheltered. They will, and I think that the attacks on the Department of Education in particular worry me, because if people don't have the luxury of thinking, if
Mm-hmm.
they can't think through some of this stuff because they're so busy. I know so many people um, who are working 2 and 3 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And some other people who can't find jobs and are hustling to try to find jobs. And so, when do you sit down and think? When do you read? When do you contemplate? And if you don't, what do you do? The flashiest demagogue that's in your face, you follow. So you're basically pulling brains out of people. It's a dystopian view. But the more I look at what's happening with,
But isn't that what's happening? I mean, we don't have art anymore, we have entertainment. I don't mind entertainment, but there was a time when entertainers were great artists.
Well,
But
but
we
the
don't.
issue art, Eric Butterworth once said that art was like the white hyacinth for your soul. In other words, who gets to stroll through a museum? I mean, years ago I went to this place in upstate New York. I forget the name of it, but it was a really cool place where people just went and spent 2 weeks doing nothing. They listened to lectures. So I was a lecturer there. It's the Chautauqua Institute, upstate New York, and I was a lecturer, and I hung out, and people brought their families. They ate communally. They listened to lectures, and the first thing I said when I came back, at that time I lived in San Francisco, and I said, we need something like that for Black people. In other words, I mean, I think there were maybe 2 Black families out of about 100. But I said, what these people were doing was they were restoring themselves, renewing themselves, thinking, and in a conversation. And do we have that? And from a structural perspective, we don't. So, just saying.
No, but I think we have
You
to
bring people down to the place where all they're doing is struggling for money.
Yeah.
They're not thinking. They don't have. And then Bernie Sanders yesterday said something on CNN. He said the 2 things that were breaking people down, one was our messed up healthcare system. He said, but the other was just stress. If you're broken down to that level where you're scrambling for food, scrambling for housing, can I pay my rent this month? That's a stress that will shorten your life. I see Bernadette in Telfair here. She says they don't want critical thinkers.
Absolutely.
That's the point, is that if you take enough people, and I'm not disrespecting people who voted for the current president, but I will say that probably half of them had their reasons about the economy. I think they were wrong, but they were okay. But some of them simply were not thinking. This man has enough smoke and mirrors and flash and dash. I'm going to lower your prices. Okay, he's been in there for almost 100 days. Are your prices lower? Yeah, I mean, he said a lot of things, none of which he could deliver. I'm going to lower inflation. How could you lower inflation when you can't control the supply chain? So you're looking at I actually had an Uber driver the other day, and we started talking. And I said, well, what about the supply chain? He said, what's that? Now, I'm not saying the brother was ignorant. He told me he was driving 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
So he's not. I said, what newspaper do you read? He said, none.
But Dr. Malveaux, hold on, wait. And you know this because you've mentored my sister, who's a professor over in Japan at this time. What was striking to her, because her focus, her concentration, as you well know, was global education policy.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
She said, and she brought it to my attention because she knew that I had spent time in the Nordic region of Europe. She said, it's amazing. You turn on the radio and you go from station to station and you're learning different languages. Everything they have is to help expand your mind. You know, as well as I, there was a time when we aspired to be teachers. There was no one who was held in higher regard in our community than the teacher, than the doctor, than the lawyer. Wait a minute, than your mom and your dad. It was never about money. It was about, the values that they instilled in you, the love of learning. You appreciated and loved and respected the people who could build things.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get too far flung because I want you to talk about, we'll connect this, because I feel like, and that's why I brought this up, I feel like we're being collapsed. We're not collapsing, we're being collapsed because as you just saw, Sister Telfair said, look, they don't want critical thinkers because, you govern critical thinkers. You manage people who are mindless, right?
No, critical thinkers are dangerous. You're dangerous, Santita. I'm dangerous. Their whole cadre of people are dangerous. And so the danger is not that we are walking the streets with guns and knives. The danger is that we're provoking people to think outside the box. And that's what they don't want. And that's why, the hands off demonstrations were dangerous. I got to give shout out to those Move On folks. 1,300 sites, millions of people, big folks in terms of the stage in DC, local folks, but all the folks who came out because they are critical thinkers. Like, and even some of those, I had a heated discussion with a brother who has a conservative guy who basically was beating the drum for the current president. And he says to me, I didn't vote for this. I said, but you did. I said,
But what did he mean? What did he mean by that? Because I hear that from a lot of people. Because a lot of people who are at the hands off rallies, a lot of people who were at these Bernie Sanders rallies. There was a reporter from Semaphore. It's a tremendous news outlet. He said, I was standing in the middle of this Bernie Sanders AOC rally, and I was looking for people who voted for him, and I couldn't find them in the immediate vicinity, because in the immediate vicinity, these were Trump people. But in 2016, people toggled between Trump and Bernie. The difference is the Republicans, while they didn't like Trump, they embraced him.
Yes.
And they said, okay, we'll work with this. The Democrats tried to bury Bernie. He's still the most popular elected official in the United States.
He's amazing. And he's amazing. I watched did you watch the town hall last night?
Yes.
And was he good? He was great. He's off the chain.
And guess what? That's why I didn't hear. I knew what people were, when people were saying that, oh, people are upset about Biden's age. No, Biden looked like he was ill. That was the problem. Bernie Sanders had a heart attack the last time that he was running for president. When he came out the hospital, you remember, Dr. Malveaux, people wanted to know, are you okay? He said, yeah. And you haven't heard any more about it, have you?
That's the truth. Bernie did. Yeah, no, Biden did look old and he looked feeble.
It's not the age. Bernie's old. He's as old as my dad.
Bernie's the same age as Biden. The affect is very different. Biden looked feeble. Bernie does not. And that's a difference. So it wasn't the age thing at all. We still haven't gotten to the bottom of the whole truth of what was wrong with Biden. But we know that something was. And we know also that there's some people inside, probably including VP Harris, who are covering it up, who basically didn't want everybody to know the whole truth. And in covering up the truth, they basically undermined the strength of the Democratic platform.
And now here we are. We are where the far right have wanted us to be. In the previous hour, I interviewed David Daley, the New York Times bestselling author, senior fellow from Fair Vote. His book, it's a trilogy. Rat Effed, the true story of the secret plan to steal our democracy. What the far right did the night that Barack Obama won. They said, you can have the presidency. We're going to take everything else, which is what they proceeded to do. Yes. We lost more than 1,000 seats during the Obama era. Nobody said anything. Then he wrote a book, Unrigged, how we're fighting back to retrieve all that we have lost, let alone make the gains. Now his new book is Anti-Democratic, which is the 50-year plot. That's the subtitle. The far right's 50-year plot to steal American elections. These folks are planning, they're plotting. But Dr. King said, well, evil men plot, good men must plan.
Yes.
It's all here before us. You started talking about 2025 a couple of years ago. You've been talking about education. You've been sounding the alarm on education. What will the impact of just simply how will tariffs, because so much is now unaffordable, Dr. Malveaux, and they're not going to go back. How are we going to be able to afford college? How are we going to be able to afford vocational schools? I mean, how are we going? I mean, what are we going to do in a world without the Department of Education? Let's just start with affordable education, because how's
Well,
that?
let's start at the bottom, if you will, at the
Okay.
entry point and go up to the top, the higher ed. At the bottom, we're going to see cuts in Head Start. We know that Head Start has been a pivotal program to making sure that lower income young people were made school ready. And we also know that Head Start is going to be cut. It's our Some communities are already seeing cuts. In rural communities, you might have had one Head Start teacher for maybe 30 kids who perhaps came from 20 to 30 miles away, rural
Mhm.
areas. And we're going to see some of that cut. What does that mean? If you get cut at age 3, 4, 5, what do you do at age 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? How much further are you going to be behind? There are all these studies, Santita, that talk about how young black people, or not young black people, young people with modest family incomes are less exposed to vocabulary than other young people with greater family incomes. In other words, by the time someone gets to the first grade, if their parent is at the top 10% of the income distribution, they have learned probably 30,000 more words than a child at the bottom of the income distribution. The child at the top of the income distribution has been read to hundreds of hours fewer, or more rather, than the
Mhm.
child at the bottom of the income distribution. So just those first 5 years of life often set the stage for the educational gap that we see a decade later, when these young people are trying to go to high school or college, um, or just getting through high school. We see those gaps. So the first inequity we'll see with the demise of the Department of Education is what happens pre-K, and that's Head Start, but it's also a number of other things. There are programs that actually, when young people show deficiencies early on, there are programs that allow them tutoring, government funded. Those programs are going to be cut. Then let's look at elementary education. Go to the next level. You've left Head Start, you left pre-K, you're going to K through K through 12, but let's say K through 6. When we look at that, what we're going to see in terms of access and equity is going to see Title One being cut. Title One is the program in the Department of Education that provides supplemental funds to schools that have a low income population. So if the schools, basically school district or school census tract, has an income that's, I believe, below 25% of the poverty line, then that school qualifies for extra funding from the feds. Title One is likely to be cut. That's a really big blow for inner city schools, especially where you have that Cincinnati. Every inner city school, every school in DC is not a Title One school. Every school in
Mhm.
Chicago is not a Title One school. You have schools where very wealthy people go to public schools in certain areas under certain circumstances, but many schools will have major problems. So we go there. Then let's go to higher ed, which is why I think a lot of people are extremely concerned. But we have to understand the pipeline. So you just can't start at higher ed and say HBCUs are going to be cut. That is true. Title III is going to be cut. I cringe at that. Title III is discretionary money for a college president. You decide what your school needs. You send a proposal to the Department of Education, and they, based on your population and a bunch of metrics, say, okay, you can have $1.5 million. You say you want it for X. They can either say yay or no. They usually say yay. That money is likely to be gone. So what else is going to be gone? Pell Grants are going to be cut.
Mhm.
Parent Plus is going to be more difficult to qualify for. So if a young person is of modest income and doesn't have any family money to pay for their tuition, they may or may not be going to college. They're even now looking at the community colleges, which have always been kind of a place in the gap. In other words, we all used to say, well, if you can't go to a 4-year, go to a 2-year and transfer. Go to a 2-year, get great good grades and transfer. Well, I'm not sure that that's going to be an option anymore either. So at the higher ed level, what we're seeing is cuts in loans and grants. And there are a number of really of very nice social special programs for students who are math and science students. As an example, if you are a sophomore and you have very good grades, 3+, there is a program where you can get extra money, not loan money, grant money, so that you can get your degree in a science, because we have a shortage of scientists, and certainly a shortage of scientists of color, and especially Black scientists. That program is likely to be cut. So the good thing about that program in the past was it gave you extra money, so you had to take out less loans. So a lot of people are being very skeptical now about the value of higher education. Many are saying, well, it's just not that important. I just talked to a little sister yesterday. She had me cracking up. She said, Bill Gates didn't go to college. I said, girlfriend, I took my Apple mirror and said, look in this mirror. Do you look like Bill Gates? Just for the record, do you look like Bill Gates?
Well, not to mention the fact that his mother was on the Federal Reserve of Seattle. I mean, one of the great fictions about these very, very wealthy people is that they came up with these wonderful inventions and ideas by themselves. Number one, they were already in, Dr. Malveaux,
They have their foot in the door.
They're from very connected families.
And they were intellectually nurtured.
Yeah.
So that a young person like a Bill Gates at 20 felt confident enough to leave college, because he knew, first of all, he knew that he had great ideas, which he did. But number two, he knew he had a safety net. Pookie don't have a safety net.
What is the study? The data shows that a white man with a high school diploma is more likely to be hired than a Black man with a college degree.
Absolutely.
So,
and also, Santita, for the record, even if they do hire the brother with a college degree, more likely to out-earn the brother.
Absolutely. So my question is, okay, because even with these barriers, we've been able to make it, which is part of our genius. Reverend Dr. Otis Moss Jr. said that don't ever underestimate the Black genius for survival, because we have demonstrated that over and over and over again. And yet at this time we must resist and fight back. And not just for Black people, for everybody. Because what do they say? I saw one expression, Black folks, white folks sneeze and Black folks get a cold. My great grandma used to say, when white folks get a cold, Black folks already have pneumonia. Mm-hmm. And so my thing is, okay, at this time, what are we to do? Because if the 2-year colleges are off the table, I mean, and sadly, we're not even considering vocational education, which is being removed from our neighborhoods and from our neighborhood schools, Dr. Malveaux, where people make great livings. I mean, where do you recommend that we go now? I mean, what do we do? I mean, because like the University of Chicago and places like the places where you went to school, U of C is $100,000 a year, undergrad. When I go past, I live here. I grew up here because my father went to grad school there. So I grew up on the campus. I'm extremely familiar with it, and I've always lived on it or near or adjacent to it. Now, and I'm not mad at anybody, but I don't see a lot of American students there. And University of Chicago's never had a lot of Black students ever. The very, very few and far between. That's always been the case. But with $100,000 a year, Dr. Malveaux, That's Columbia. I mean, Harvard is almost there. And Howard is not cheap.
No, and so that becomes the issue. But here's the other thing that's interesting. This administration has been taking students' visas from them. One of the things that I know, at Bennett and other colleges, we go after international students. I'm going to tell you why. They
Why?
don't need financial aid. So they come, the tuition is $100,000. Many of them have the $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
You're not trying. So that's gravy at some level. Now, all of them don't. And of course, they're, poor young people are coming from other places. But foreign students are a cash cow. But now, if this administration is saying we don't want foreign students, what is that going to mean for some colleges' bottom line? And it's just a question mark, and I really haven't thought it all the way through or talked about it. I talked about it with one colleague, but I haven't talked it through much with colleagues. But the whole way that they're upending education is going to be a financial challenge for colleges at the 4-year level, at the 2-year level. The other thing that's interesting to think about in terms of higher education is graduate education. Let's say that a young person can cobble his or her way through to get those 4 years. Maybe they've got loans, maybe they've got grants, they've got some Pell, maybe their university, because they're outstanding, has given them enough to get through. There have been Department of Education funds available for graduate students that are likely to be less available. The Republican, and I won't say all Republicans, but they don't believe that education should be subsidized. They constantly throw in the rap of, what about the working class person who, whatever. In other words, they don't want to hear that education should be subsidized. But if we want to have a robust economy, we do have to subsidize education. So I'm concerned about graduate education, especially when we're talking about educators, teachers. There are things in the federal budget today that may not be there by fall, and those are grants for people who intend to go into teaching math, teaching science, places where, again, I can't tell you, working with a sister who is looking for a special education teacher. She can't find one. There's a huge shortage in special education. So basically, if we start at kindergarten or pre-K and go all the way to higher ed, we are talking about attacks everywhere. And then past higher ed, let's talk about research. And when, a lot of our young people, they get their undergraduate degree, graduate degree, maybe their PhD, maybe something else, then they want to do research. Now, some universities, but fewer because of these cuts, will fund them. Where will the funding for research come from? Or are we simply going to shut the door on research? And what we're seeing now is a lot of people attempting to shut the door on research. It's not necessary.
Why?
Because they're stupid. I mean, that's the inelegant answer.
No, that's what it's sounding right to me.
But they're basically, to do this, it's like a farmer eating her own seed corn, saying, this is what I had for the future, but I'm going to eat it now because I'm hungry. So basically, and you have a disdain for education, a higher education, in some Republican circles. Not all, but in some. I mean, one of the things that puzzles me, when you look back at the history of Republicans, most Republicans have lifted up education. The Bushes, both of them, supported higher education and HBCUs.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Dole and Bob Dole were great supporters of Bennett College. Even Richard Nixon. I say even Richard Nixon because that's probably scraping the bottom.
But I'm saying historically, Republicans have been supportive of HBCUs.
And of education in general.
In general.
But what you have now is an ignoramus, and I know you don't like name calling, but that's the only thing I can say. Somebody who has not had the benefit of education.
But the only reason I take umbrage with that is this. I see him as I see him as the front person
Yes.
for a mindset. See, because he sent his kids to the best schools, and
Mm-hmm.
they all do. They education for me, but not for thee.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I had
That's what I'm saying, because I see it with all of these people, because all of these people may not only send their kids to the top schools here, they send them all over the world. So they believe in education, but for me, not for thee. And
no, exactly. No, I had a debate years ago with a guy who said he did not support Pell Grants because he felt like people should just go to community college and work themselves up. And my response to him, he had 4 kids. He was a muckety white guy who, and I said, where do your kids go to school? Do they go to community college school? He said, oh, no. My daughter is at Harvard and my son. I said, so you want the best, but you want young people of color to have less than the best. And his response was, well, they haven't earned it. Well, they haven't earned it. I'll never forget that. I got put off the air for that one. But I've been put out in some of the best
why
places in
were
the.
you put off the air?
I might have used a little profanity. Um,
You know what? Okay, look at the clock. It's 12:48 your time. My sister, I agree with you on that. That's something that you get put off the air over. Because let me tell you, for someone to say that about our children, the cure for some diseases out there with some of these kids who we have walked past, Dr. Malveaux, you see them every day. Even Dr. Ron McNair. I met him at the North Carolina A&T graduation because my father spoke there. It was in 78. Never will forget it, Dr. Malveaux. And he was, you know, MIT, just like you, had gotten his
he was a
PhD there.
classmate, actually.
Oh, we were so excited. But did you know that he was an at-risk student when they brought him into North Carolina A&T?
I believe it.
He was at risk, and they
I
went through his journey at A&T to graduating at the top of his class. But just because who you were is not who you might be, Dr. Malveaux.
precisely. No,
So
exactly. You know,
so
I
what?
mean, it's but I don't think I use that much profanity. I think I might have said something about the man was a racist and an idiot. I
I
don't
think
think I
the
called
fact that you
him.
said called him out as a racist, I think that's what got you put off. I mean, let's be very clear.
Yeah, I
I
know
mean,
you're not supposed to call a racist, even if they are a racist. I got it. I know the protocol. Um,
okay, help. Thank you for that. I'm trying to make sense of what you just said, but okay, I'll go with it.
basically, what I'm saying is you can't make it plain. And people can say anything about our people and code it this way and code it that way, and we're supposed to sit there and smile. And that is something that I'm not really good at. Um, And so, this man told me where all his kids were going to and all that. And I said, so you think your kids are more worthy than these other kids? And he said, yes. And I said, why? My response was, why? And he went through this whole thing. This one did this and this one did that. And I said, and these other ones have the opportunity? He said, well, that's not my fault. I said, okay, so you're accepting the status quo, but you're not willing to open doors. And then I did call the man a racist.
But
I
see,
didn't
Dr.
call
Malveaux, I think that's what we're looking at, and this is something you spent your whole life fighting. Part of the reason I have so much respect for you, and so many people are saying they're so glad to see you here today, is because you've taken all of these great credentials and you did not go where many of your fellow people all the way at the tippity top, the 0.000001% of us have gone. You came right back and said, okay, let me tell you what I learned. And this is how we can save our children. This is what we need to do. And I will also say you're the head of Push Excel, the Push for Excellence program. Let me just give you those. I can't give you those bona fides. I mean, that's what you've been doing. And I'm just saying, how do we work our way out of this? Because and Dr. Whitaker, Sonia Whitaker, we're talking about Saturday schools.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how can what is that? I only have about 3 or 4 more minutes, and I want you to come back here because I think that we need to have a carve out on education and what we're going to do about it. Because Dr. Malveaux, I see them closing the doors.
Yes, that's exactly what this whole take Sojourner Truth off the trail, try to close our museum, lie about our museum. The Saturday school movement, which I want to spend some more time sort of fleshing out, but we didn't always have a museum. We didn't always have even public education. Our people
Mhm.
taught each other at church
Mhm.
on Saturday. The Saturday schools were our alternative form of education. If it wasn't going to be taught in the classroom, we were going to teach it. Many taught it at home. I mean, I learned at home. My parents made me read. Now they make me read. I love to read, but they give me a book and say, "Come back with a book report." In the
Yes.
you know, and
Yeah.
so a Saturday school kind of thing would do some of that. Our young people are losing connection with history. You know, we are. This is what April is a National Poetry Month. I remember, gosh, I was in a segregated school in Mississippi because they put me out of so many in San Francisco, and we had to learn the creation. God woke up and said, "I'm gonna make me a world." We had to. That's a long poem. We had to learn that. Um, there was, but who knows? We wear the mask that grins and lies, that hides our cheeks and shade our
Yeah.
eyes. From Paul Lawrence Dunbar.
Mhm.
Who knows? We must know these days. Claude McKay. If we must die, let it not be like
Mhm.
Claude.
Right. Let us
Hunted,
nobly die.
yes, pressed to the wall, hunted and fighting back. That's our history. And that's a history that will not be taught in public education. So the Saturday school movement, and what I'm trying to do is work with a couple people to come up with like a curriculum and share with our churches and say, can we just start maybe one Saturday a month and expand it? But if we had all our young people, not just Black young people, because white kids know this too, and you know what? And white kids want to know it.
They do want to
They
know.
very much want to know it. I mean, I remember when our colleague Donna Leak, who's on the Illinois Board of
Mhm.
Education, put some young people together to talk about diversity in education. And one of the things that was interesting was a young white girl. She said it was more important for her to learn about Black history than it was for her to learn about algebra or what she said, algebra or calculus. She said because she could always learn those things. When would she learn Black history? And she was a brilliant young girl who said, you know, this history is my history too.
But I mean,
And I
she's our child. See, because
yes,
this to me, this is wait a minute. These kids they're already down the street on this. Red, yellow, black, brown, and white. We
yeah,
can underestimate what our children know, and we can't continue to color code them because they're down the street. Dr. Malveaux on the two-party system. They are they you know the book I Dream a World.
yes,
They they have told us Jonah Karsh, a young man from If Not Now, that brilliant group of young Jewish activists. They have said, look, he said in the middle of one of these panel discussions, he interjected, and he's one of the most well mannered young men you could ever want to meet. I think Jonah is about 23 or 24. He said, no, 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 you don't understand. I don't want your world. I want another world.
good for
I
him.
don't want this. He said, I'm not going to stand for genocide. I don't want apartheid anywhere, period. So I'm going to fight that. He is one of the top organizers on fair housing here in Chicago. So I
You'll have to
mean,
send me his information. I'd like to know more about him.
and I have a whole host of these young people, and you know what? They would come in, and we could work with them because I was coming out of our soror, Roberta Flack's funeral. She was like godmother to me.
Mm,
Thinking about her getting a full scholarship to Howard at 13, but her parents made her wait until she was 15 because they couldn't fathom sending a 13-year-old to college. And I think of the arts. I think of when I look at Sammy Davis on film at 3 and his genius and Michael Jackson. Wait, hold on. There's so much that we need to do. And knowing that if you get a musical education, you do better in math because music is nothing but
Yes,
all math.
music is math.
It's math. The last 2 minutes belong to you, Dr. Malveaux. And I promise the audience, everybody, she will be back. I'm going to bring her back next week because I know the tumult in the markets is not over. And yeah, no, I have to bring you on about all of that. We can talk about everything. That's the beauty about you. You're an easy guest. I don't have to get anybody else.
The tumult in the market is not over. Folks need to, if you need to check with your financial advisor. I'm not advising people to sell everything, but there's some things you may need to sell. What I lost a third of my portfolio because I was over invested in Apple. And I was over invested in Apple because I bought it when it was real cheap. And they kept splitting. And I'm like, mm-hmm. And my financial advisor kept saying, Doc, you got to sell some of this. Well, I'm one of these people who does not believe that fat meat is greasy. So it'll come back. Not all of it, but it'll come back. Don't panic, folks, but pay attention. The last, I want to encourage people. I didn't go to the hands-off march because I was doing something or other. And I also, with my, I still walk with a cane sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I can't be in a big crowd because if somebody knocks me over, it's all over but the shouting. And the big crowds, that does tend to happen. But I was so excited to see that. Excited to see all the people there. People, I don't understand who didn't read Project 2025, who is surprised. The man told us what he was going to do. He's done exactly what he said he was going to do. But there are very few guardrails. But people, there are some guardrails. So wherever you can resist, and resist not in public, but also in private. 381 books taken from the Naval Academy Library. Maya Angelou's books. There's actually a book, Santita, I called a friend. She wrote a book called When Race Becomes Real. And I have an essay in it. So I called, I said, we famous. They kicked us out the Naval Academy Library. Anything. Well, I have well-heard anything they will basically deal with. But we have to deal back. Malcolm once said, it's a fool who allows the enemy to educate their children. That's what Malcolm X said. What does that mean? It means you take care of your child's education. You take your child to church for the youth group. You help find or fund a Saturday school. You make sure your young person is appropriately girded against this nonsense that's coming up. Because nonsense is coming up. We haven't even got to 100 days yet.
I'm sorry.
So it'd be like the 20th of this month when we get to the 100 days. And every day there's some drama. But we have to keep ourselves. I was walking down the street, Santita, with I keep a cloud over my head. But I saw this little sister. She couldn't have been more than 15 or 16. And her daddy holding hands and walking down the street. And it just made me grin. I mean, the affection between them was really palpable. And I was like, And we need to look for occasions of joy because joy is resistance. Whenever we're happy, we're resisting the nonsense that these people have injected into our space.
Well, as the song says, this joy I have, the world didn't give it to me, and the world cannot take it away.
There you go.
Dr. Julianne Malveaux, every Monday on WPFW. Go to WPFW.org, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. She needs your support. She deserves your support. You're going to get more information just like this. Where can we see your nationally syndicated column?
TriceEdney.com, or you can go on to JulianneMalveaux.com.
Let's start with JulianneMalveaux.com. Go there. Julianne Malveaux. Yes, the French Julianne Malveaux. That's it. She's pretty cool. It's all right. We ain't mad. We love her. But I love you, Dr. Julianne Malveaux. Thank you for all that you are and do.
And I love you, Santita Jackson. We family. We go back. All that good stuff.
Oh, of course we are. That's it. And that's what we do. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Everybody check out Julianne Malveaux every Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, WPFW, everybody. Please check her out. And JulianneMalveaux.com. so that you can see her nationally syndicated column. I love you, everybody. I'll see you on Keep Up Alive, and she'll be with me on Sunday because we got a lot to talk about on the iHeart Radio Network. God bless you, everybody.